So let's go ahead and dive right in. This all started about 15 years ago where I was looking for inspiration. Some of you may know that I'm not just a plein air artist. My favorite medium is actually woodcuts and steel engravings. So I have a fascination for that particular type of artwork. And I was looking for inspiration again. As many of us have had in our lives, we went away from our artwork a little bit and got too busy with work. So I was looking for something that would inspire me to really get back to my art. And I found this amazingly beautiful engraving of a place where I live near the French Broad River in Western North Carolina. It simply said the French Broad. But I've seen so many scenes very similar to this. Thought it was beautiful. I ordered it, but it wasn't quite what I expected when I got it in because on the back side of it was all this text. I said, "You got to be kidding me. Somebody just sliced this out of an ancient book and sold it to me." I felt really bad about it. I was like, I'm part of that bad trend of stealing out of books and selling them as prints. Well, it turned out to be very serendipitous because on that page, there were some very inspiring words that made me think. It was, what will become of these unreplaceable natural places? Well, they were talking about my backyard. They were talking about Western North Carolina, the place that I love. But who was talking and where is it coming from? Well, I discovered slowly through research online, but mostly in a rare bookstore, finding a copy of this place and this book called Picturesque America, as you see at the top. I'm like, well, what is Picturesque America? So I'm looking at this book and I discovered it was from the 1800s. And it is a wonderful publication that I knew nothing about. But there was also another piece of artwork in there of Lover's Leap, a place that I absolutely love and know because it's right on the Appalachian Trail. It's one of those places that is unmistakable. If you've ever been there, you recognize it. And so I'm like, okay, who were these people? What was this all about? So, what book did it come from? And I did that research, as I said, and I found out that the publication had been created between 1872 and 1874 by Appleton Press out of New York, and it was released as a serial. You would get one of these every month or so in this pale blue jacket, and you'd pay a whopping 50 cents of the time, and then you'd get another one the next month. All of these adventure tales of artists and writers and poets going around America discovering the picturesque. And you would later bind it into these giant leather books, which are just amazing to behold. They look like a book of spells. Some of you, particularly Patricia, I know have their own set now. And Becky actually has one in her remarkable library. I'm like, woo, look at, she's showing off. Thank you, Patricia. So yeah, it's something to behold, and it's inspiring not just to the people of the 1800s, but it's still inspiring people today. And that's what so much of this is about, because it was created by these adventurous artists and writers. And there's one of them right there, Harry Finn, on the top of the arch of Natural Bridge in Virginia. So he was at the top of that, painting into the valley, and that spot still exists today. And we've been lucky enough to discover it. So anyway, they published a total of 65 of these adventure journals, all in search of the picturesque that you could, again, later bind into these giant volumes. So digging a little deeper, I found out its real impact, that it was done right after the Civil War. This is during Reconstruction, and unity and connection was on everyone's mind. I mean, they'd just gone through the bloodiest war in American history. And the key was they were seeking a source of national pride. And we didn't have the Parthenon and the pyramids and all these ancient structures, but we did have something older and absolutely amazing, and that is the natural places across the Americas. I mean, here's an example right there of one that is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. That's from what they now call Artist Point because so many artists have painted in that exact spot. But this was the original by Thomas Moran that actually inspired the fact that we have that as our very first national park, all published in Picturesque America for the first time. So anyway, this was all done before the state and national parks were established. And matter of fact, when they got to the point in 1873, of putting Yellowstone into the publication, they called it our national park, not even thinking that there would be more. They thought it was pretty cool that this happened, but they were actually inspiring people not just to come out to our first national park, but to have the idea that we could have more in our lives. So Picturesque America brought awareness to these natural and historic treasures. But for me, one question still remained from that very first piece that I found. What will become of these unreplaceable natural places? I had so many talks with other artists, conservationists, and everything else. And we said, I got an idea. Maybe we can do more. Maybe this can be more than just a curiosity and a thing from the past. So, Preserving a Picturesque America, or what we like to call PAPA, was formed. And so our goals are to seek the vantage point of the early adventure artist, to recreate that art of the picturesque, and of course, ultimately, to preserve these sacred places that have inspired so many. That's what we're all about at PAPA. And that's why we've invited you guys to, frankly, join in on the fun. We really enjoyed being in New England and discovering those places. So now it's time to recreate and see what we can do to protect them. So let's just go through PAPA's objectives real quick. We, of course, love to locate those original vantage points. With people all around America and people like Becky's help, I was able to find these locations in your neck of the woods. Once we find those, we try to determine the preservation needs of those places. Sometimes they're already protected, but we still need to support the people that are protecting them. And sometimes they're in danger. Maybe we can do something to bring awareness and protect them. We want to, of course, engage the community, and we want to get local artists involved and create local chapters like we do all around America. We got North Carolina, South Carolina, a Tennessee, and now we want to get into New England and do it in Vermont and Tennessee. Vermont and New Hampshire, like the Tennessee chapter, and the New York chapter. So we want to get artists, poets, and writers. What we like to say is it's not just about the plein air artist. We changed our title a little bit. It used to be Preservation Through the Power of Art, but now we say Preservation Through the Power of the Arts. So if you also know poets and writers and musicians, we want them involved. We want all of the artistic voices to do what we can to protect our muse, protect the thing that really inspires us. And that's these wonderful natural places. So we also want to be educators. We're building a PAPA curriculum for the younger, not just artists, but just classrooms. So we want to take invitations to go to these schools and bring kids out and engage in the natural world. We obviously want to find the conservationists and historians in the area. They're not only big helpers, but they are the team that we need to make these things happen. The big thing that we'll do as artists, we'll have a big exhibition and sale of the art that you create after we go back to those exact same places where Harry Finn and the other artists did in the 1800s. This is an example of one of the shows that we did. And this one, we had an auction afterwards of the winning pieces of art. And so we call all of our shows Preservation Through Art. And then we just have the Vermont version or the North Carolina version or the Colorado version, et cetera. So we'll also be publishing a new version of the serial. Now we're doing it much slower. They did the whole thing over 4 years. I've already been at this for 15 years and I'm going much slower pace, but I don't have a whole publishing team. But luckily, I do have artists like you guys. So what happens is after we have the show, the jury selects a winning artist for each one of the original pieces of artwork, and they are going to be represented in a new publication. They couldn't print in color in those days, but luckily we can. So we can represent you in all your glory, and we don't have to do woodcuts of each and every piece like they did in the 1800s. So we also are, of course, advocates, and we want to promote you as pop-up artists. We love the artists that care about these historic and natural places. And so we want to do everything we can to lift you up as well. And I'll go into more of that in the benefits of being a member of Preserving a Picturesque America. And then the biggest thing that I personally feel is just so powerful and so important is that we support those local conservation groups and nonprofits that are actually the boots on the ground making this happen, like the Green Mountain Club and all these different groups that are around the whites and the greens and everything all over New Hampshire and Vermont. These are the important partners in each community. So let's talk a little bit about the chapter and the serial of the White Mountains. So we are combining kind of Vermont and New Hampshire because you guys all like each other, as far as I can tell. Y'all are nicely nested together as two states. And of course, we can all agree that we don't like Massachusetts. So therefore, that's the thing that y'all have to combine and say, let's work together. And there's, of course, y'all right on the side where half the time you can jump over to the other side and paint in Vermont, or you can paint in New Hampshire. So I actually love the fact that you guys get along so well. And as we'll learn later, some of these are on the Connecticut River, and they were literally bouncing back and forth between the states. So we're going to have to work together to make that particular fun show. The particular serial about the White Mountains was published in 1872 specifically. It was one of the earlier ones that they published. It included one steel engraving, which made it a better, more collectible one of the serials, and a high number of actual woodcut engravings of 14. That's an unusually high number. So a total of 15 different pieces of art that we've been trying to locate and get you guys to come out and paint again. They traveled by horseback, but they did a lot of hiking, and they also traveled by stagecoach to get to different parts of the Whites. But they did have to do a lot of it on foot. Luckily, you got still wonderful people doing trail maintenance there. So we may do a little hiking, but we've also got our own personal stagecoaches that can get us part of the way there. So it's not going to be too bad. So they focused in this particular serial on how grand this area was, how rugged, and they talked about it as being very accessible, even though it was so rugged. But they had worked very hard to create roads that the stagecoaches could actually function on. Oh, one of the things I wanted to point out here was at the top, the writer was Susan Carter. She was one of the few female artists at the time, excuse me, female writers at the time, that was actually acknowledged under her real name. So often in the 1800s, women were using pseudonyms to get published. Well, she was sought after as being such a pro in that area and someone that knew it so well. She insisted on them actually publishing under her name, and that made room for other artists. Picturesque America had more female writers than any other publication of its time. The artist was Harry Finn, which was the most prolific of all of the artists for Picturesque America, and he absolutely fell in love with New England. And I'll show you something else he fell in love a little bit later. It's a wonderful piece of his artwork. Anyway, so let's look at some of the pieces. Again, there's 15, and it would take me a long time to go through all of those pieces of artwork. But as a member, you will get a PDF version of that in a guide that'll take you to each one of these places. Now, some of you that have gone to Mount Washington take that crazy road up to the top, which is almost crazy to go back down because your brakes are going to burn out. They took it by stagecoach. I don't know if this works if I zoom in or not. Let's see. Nope, it doesn't quite work. But if you look on the left, can y'all see my mouse? Nod your head if you can on the left side. Nope. Oh, well, I guess that doesn't work on this. Wait, I can annotate. Here we go. Right about here in blue. If y'all can see that, that's actually one of the stagecoaches going up to the top. And Eric and I were able to find pretty much that same spot because most of the road that we use today was the same road that they used then. So how do I exit that? There you go. Take that off. Good. Okay. So now the next one is Crystal Cascade. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a wonderful hike to get there. But one of the things we discovered is sometimes Harry Finn would paint himself into them. But if you look down here in the bottom left-hand corner, he actually painted a fellow artist of the time. We're researching and trying to figure out who it was. We know it's not Harry because Harry only had a very prolific mustache. He did not have a full gray beard. So this must have been an artist that he admired at the time, but it would have been an older artist. So we want to discover that. It's one of those fun little mysteries to look into. But we were able to find the spot. And we actually, Eric and I, climbed over to where the artist in the piece was painting. And then we realized we were too close. We actually had to back up. So Harry was looking at another artist painting up close. And so you can see everything matches up pretty doggone well, including the rocks. Harry would always really maintain the detail and did not actually exaggerate very much. And so there's Eric and I very happy that we were able to discover it without actually falling into the creek because we had to do some serious climbing to get there. And then this, I would be remiss if I didn't say, I hate to pick favorite pieces of artwork, but from New Hampshire, this is by far one of my top favorites. This is them descending after they went to the top of Mount Washington on horseback. And I have my theory that Harry Finn actually fell in love with Susan, the rider that was tagging along and guiding them. Because look at the strong, amazing depiction of that woman on that horse. She's in control. She's the one that's guiding them. That's something that you didn't see rendered in those days very much. So she has a place of honor in this painting and in this publication. And if any of you guys know someone that's willing to take us on horseback to the top, I'd like to recreate this. I'm not sure if that's possible or legal anymore, but boy, would it be fun. So of course, all of these pieces of art will be in the new guide that we are currently creating to get you to these spots so you can paint in the exact same spot where the artist did 150 years ago and do your version. So now let's look into Mount Mansfield. So this one was written by Royster Johnson, and he was kind of a playwright as well, and an editor of a lot of publications after he wrote for Picturesque America. Harry Finn, again, was the main artist, and this one was also published in 1872. They did 11 renderings, and they were all converted to wood engravings so they could be printed, of course. And they traveled by carriage, and then they hiked to get to all those daring spots that they were looking for. But they were able to take a stagecoach for the majority of it to get to the top of Mount Mansfield. They focused in this particular serial on how unspoiled this region was. They went on and on and on how much they loved Vermont because they felt like it was not ruined. And I think actually the Vermont folks have done a good job of making sure that doesn't happen anymore. And that's obviously our job to continue to make sure that it doesn't as well for the future. Let's see, how do I get rid of that little annotation line? There we go. Okay, so I want to also mention some of the great partners that we're going to be working with. We've already established the big help of the Green Mountain Club. Keegan was awesome there. We'll also be working with the University of Vermont because they actually own the nose, essentially, of Mount Mansfield. Vermont State Parks, we're working with them, as well as Smugglers State Park for the notch. And these partners are so important to actually protect the places. We sometimes feel a little helpless as artists. We go, well, what can I do? Well, these are the people that we partner with that know what needs to be done. So we are going to bring awareness to them about how good of a job they're doing. I'll paint a little picture for you because at the show, there'll be the original artwork from the 1800s framed and up on the wall. And we will be surrounding it by the artwork that you guys create, the modern depictions 150 years later. And then to the side, it will say, who is actually going to benefit from the proceeds of the sales of this art? And if you want to donate, heaven forbid they won't buy a piece of art. But let's say they can't afford the art, but they do want to support. Well, maybe they'll volunteer, or maybe they'll just send $100 to this group. That's also important. So we can go beyond just they must buy artwork. We want to educate them on the fact that these are the people actually making conservation happen in the area. So let's look into Vermont again. This particular rock is like everybody said, you are crazy if you're going to find a rock in Smuggler's Notch. There are so many of them, just forget about it. Well, I don't mind hiking around, cinching up my boots, and looking at every bloody rock that's out there. And going through there, you will not believe this. Unfortunately, I didn't have a photo that I could share with you, but that tree and that gnarly root is still there. It's like a bonsai. It has just gotten bigger. That root that you see twisting over that stone is now the size of a tree. I mean, it's at least 12 inches, maybe 14 inches in diameter. And I was just amazed. Now, if it isn't the same bloody tree, it's the offspring of it, and it's hanging on for its life. And it was a wonderful discovery, and one of the ones I'll be sharing with you guys. Now, here's an interesting piece of graphic history, if you will. This is absolutely out of scale. So if you've ever been on the nose of Mount Mansfield, they wanted to show the drama of climbing that thing. So they've got all these guys here with binoculars and their alpenstocks and their hats and everything, and they're scaling the mountain. These guys are absolute giants because I've been there. Now, here's the interesting part of graphic history. Harry Finn was up there, and in the journal, it was so windy, he was having the toughest time getting a sketch in. He was losing his hat constantly, and it was blowing his paper all over the place. He was having a very difficult time. So all he did was actually, if you look here, the outline of the mountains and the steps of the rocks are absolutely accurate. They are very well done. But he didn't draw any people. And I know Harry's skill from studying him from years. And he would not have done them that lanky. He's actually a really good portrait artist as well as a landscape artist. And I said, that doesn't look like Harry's artwork. Well, we found out from his sketch, he didn't draw anybody in. But the editor said, well, they talked about climbing it. So he told the engraver, a second artist, said, hey, add people climbing that mountain. Well, that guy had never been there before. He had no idea. So he just drew people on the rocks that Harry had drawn climbing the mountain. These people would be 40 feet tall. That is completely inaccurate. So that was one of the challenges. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see some people up there on top of that other one. That's that's you're on the nose looking at the rest of the face of Mount Mansfield. Those people would be 180 feet tall. That is not possible. But it's not so much an embellishment as it was just a graphic flaw because they weren't able to text them or give them a call and go, hey, give me a scale on that, Harry. I can't figure this thing out. They just did it, published it, had a nice day. But it did do one thing that actually helped me when I was on Mount Mansfield, and that is I noticed all of the guys here scaling had a strap on their hat. And I'm always wearing a hat, especially when I'm out there. There's one that PBS will not let me lose. And literally because they've been shooting that and there's a certain continuity they want on my YouTube channel and they want it on the PBS show. And they said, don't lose that hat. And please don't take it on these adventures unless you're filming. Well, I noticed that this guy right here, if you notice, is flying off his head, but there's a little strap on it. So before I started climbing Mount Mansfield, I found a leather strap, tied it to the back, and then tied it to my hat. I think Becky actually helped me with that. Thank you very much. I think it was your leather. That's right. It was. You're the saving grace because I would have lost my hat. Thank you, Becky. So I took that, tied it on there. That's now that famous piece of leather because check this out. The Rock of Terror. Okay, I thought that was an embellishment. No, the Rock of Terror actually exists, but none of the people from Mount Mansfield knew where it was. I actually found postcards from this. It's been lost for at least 80 years. And we did find a photograph of it. And if you notice, that guy has a strap and his hat's flying off. And you may think this is embellished. You may think this is a little crazy, but getting to it was hard, but we found it. And yes, my hat flew off as well. Luckily, I had mine strapped to my back and was able to save it. And my buddy who was up there escorting me caught it just as it was flying off of my head. So this is not a place I highly recommend climbing for if you're afraid of heights. The Rock of Terror sounded a little bit embellished, but it was a little bit it'll give you the willies, trust me. But the place where the artist was sitting was a nice flat spot. And this happens so often. We go literally, this is the only place I could possibly set up an easel or a sketch pad. It's the only flat spot that can see that rock in that spot. So I want to give you one last tale in Vermont. And that is, now we all know in New Hampshire, there's the old man in the mountain, right? And we also know what happened, unfortunately, to the old man in the mountain. Well, in Vermont, they have the old woman in the mountain. And I showed this to all the people in the Green Mountain Club, and none of them had seen this or heard of it. They said that's made up. There is no profile of a woman on Mount Mansfield. I've been there for 30 years, never seen it. Well, when I was taking a hike at the top, from a distance, I saw this. And I said, this feels incredibly similar to the engraving. And then I asked the fellow I was with, I said, what's that down there? He said, well, that's one of the parking lots. And I said, I want to go there. Let's go there next. So went hiking a couple miles later. Guess what? There is a spot that if you step 5 feet to the left, 5 feet to the right, you cannot see her. And you may not quite be able to see her. I lined it up to match the engraving. There she is. 102 years later, that's the last thing I ever found was published was talking about her was 102 years ago. No one has talked about her or done any publishing of her in 102 years. But I know exactly the spot to stand to make it happen. And I was so excited, I pulled out my little kit. And some of you may know I paint with walnut ink, the same way Harry Finn did 150 years ago, because he stopped painting in color because he said they couldn't even print it. So he'd start doing everything in black and white. And I do that before I carve my engraving. So pulled out my box and painted the same spot. It was a real honor to be the first one to paint it again in probably at least 100 years. And this is one of the things that we want to share with you guys. We want to take you to these magical spots and be able to share it with others that have never experienced it before. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. When you join it as a Papa member, it's a 12-month membership. And we'll put your bio and sample works on our Papa website because we want everyone to know who are these artists that actually care about the natural world. And so you give us that profile information, and we put that up there on our site under the New England chapter. So there'll be links, of course, to your website and your social media, because again, we want to publicize you the best we can. Then you'll be receiving a Vantage Point guide that we're working on right now that will guide you to all of those spots in both New Hampshire and Vermont. So then you'll get the coveted Papa Adventure sticker. You may notice we replaced the hiking sticks with art, we got the pencil and we got the paintbrush there. But then of course you'll get your membership sticker as well. It's funny, you'll see these around the nation. A lot of people will be driving around, they'll see one on the back of a car, they'll see one and they'll go, aha, somewhere around here is one of those Papa artists recreating the art from the 1800s. So we're planning on doing guided paint outs. And also, of course, the guide will get you there on your own if you don't want to actually do it as a group. But the opportunity, of course, to join in the show that will be juried. And then the jury will be selecting a different artist to be in the new publication that will be out after the show itself. So what is next? We're going to finish that Vantage Point guide to help you out. And we're establishing this chapter. So this is something we'll talk a little bit more about. We need officers that are local in Vermont, in New Hampshire, and volunteers. We do not have a Papa jet, unfortunately, or a helicopter. I'm working on a parachute at least because I'm usually climbing something. I think I can get one of those cheap, but I can't be everywhere in the country. So we need people in these areas to help the artists find these locations. We're going to help you help them. And we'll go through more details of what the officers and the people in those areas can help us do. So we want to invite preservation-minded artists to join. Now that you've learned about it, you can tell other folks that would like to be part of this. We're going to be creating these paint out events. And of course, again, you can go on your own time. We need help finding the best venue and date for these exhibitions. You guys know your backyard better than anybody in the Papa organization. It's going to be different in Colorado than it is going to be in the Carolinas. There's going to be in New England, et cetera, et cetera. So we are going to depend on you to help us find the ideal venue to sell the artwork, to support you, and to support the cause. So we also need sponsors. So we need people to sponsor the show and the chapter. So as a nonprofit, of course, they can write that off, but we need that to keep things going and to actually be able to afford to do these shows around the country. We also would like names of people that could be on the jury. We don't want our jury to be only the Papa board and the members of Papa in Western North Carolina. They will be on the jury, but we also want jury members from Vermont and New Hampshire. So we are very open to suggestions of people that you think would be appropriate to judge the artwork they'll be coming in for the show and for the publication.
Over a century ago, Picturesque America sent out an ambitious group of artists and writers to give our natural landscape a voice, and they influenced a pivotal shift towards conservation. Inspired by their impact, we are the new adventure artists seeking to continue their legacy. So we seek the original historic vantage points of the artist. Recreate the art of the picturesque. and most importantly, to preserve the beautiful places that inspire us. We want to invite all artists, writers, and lovers of nature to get involved. Learn how to join and support our mission at preservationthroughart.org. Preserving a Picturesque America. Preservation through the power of the arts.